Hello and welcome to another Filmcast Without a Cause. It's time to begin the process. I'm Jacob Rosdale, and don't blink and answer these questions.
Sorry, that was too funny. I'm Patrick.
What is your name?
I'm Patrick.
What is your name?
Patrick Boberg.
What is your... Okay, enough of that.
Wow, you're good. You were thinking about that ahead of time, weren't you?
I was. I'm referencing, of course, our upcoming discussion of The Master. But before we get to that, Pat, let's talk some news. It's been a while deliberately, actually, since we talked about superhero movies. But with this week's home video release, DVD, Blu-ray, of The Avengers, there's been buzz about what's being called Marvel Phase 2. That's 4 films leading up to the Avengers sequel. Those 4 films, I'm doing this off of memory, in order: Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the Winter Soldier, and Guardians of the Galaxy, which is the one that had some news this week when James Gunn was confirmed as director. Pat, do you have any thoughts on James Gunn?
Not him specifically, because I have not seen his films. I believe you've seen Super, correct?
I've seen both Slither and Super, and he was the screenwriter of the Dawn of the Dead remake. That's something not to forget, because that's a very geek-friendly credit.
Well, then I have seen that one, because that I will give a tip of the hat to, although I can't compare it against the original, because I haven't seen that. But either way, I am pretty stoked about it, because... having read that, and then Joss Whedon actually was behind him a week before the release of the news that he was in it, I decided I had to go out and buy, cave to Marvel's marketing power and buy a couple trades of Guardians of the Galaxy to understand these characters. And I have to say I'm in love with Groot, but the walking tree, they can only say his name. And I think this film has some serious power to be something cool. And if this guy can deliver... it could be something really amazing.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this James Gunn thing. He's worked on a bunch of nerd-friendly projects that I listed off, and he's got this really, especially after Super, it's such a twisted film and take on the superhero genre. And I think he also did a film called The Specials, which I have not seen. That's kind of like, it was a Mystery Men type movie before Mystery Men came out. I think Rob Lowe's in it, and Melissa Joan Hart. I'm probably going to have to track that down now. But I think, and he had this quote when he was officially announced the director, that made me think this guy is the perfect guy for the job. He said, and I quote, "As a lifelong lover of Marvel Comics, space epics, and raccoons, this is the movie I've been waiting to make since I was 9 years old." He's referencing, of course, Rocket Raccoon, who is one of the cast members of Guardians of the Galaxy. I think it's that kind of irreverent humor that's going to make this work or not work. And you mentioned you bought some of those trades, and that's my suspicion of why Marvel's going ahead with an unknown property, is if they put it up here with a big of a release as Thor or Iron Man, they could build a whole franchise out of nothing, and the nerds like us, who I've also been reading some of the trades, will buy just because we don't want to be going into this film with the same knowledge base as your typical ticket holder. We want to be a little more informed.
I do think that there was some sort of reason beyond just wanting people to buy the comics, and that if the 2 that I've read, the Thanos Imperative and the War of Kings, and in these comics there is a definite connection to the Avengers and to Thanos, who made a cameo on the post-credit scene of Avengers. So there's definitely something that they could bring these 2 together and kind of bring the cosmic, as they call it in Marvel Comics, to Earth, which I don't understand why all these cosmic characters care so much about Earth. But there's something there. And the idea that you could bring in a walking, talking tree, half human, somebody who's supposed to kill Thanos. That's his whole mission in life. And a raccoon. That's just something that's going to make it all the more fun. And if it's successful, I'll be incredibly surprised.
I think it's not going to be your typical superhero movie, that's for sure. And it's going to be a team movie where I think there's not as much canon, or at least they don't need to be as responsible to the canon as they've had to be with like Iron Man and Thor, where the nerds will get upset if they change the origin drastically. They can pretty much create whatever they want with these characters, and no one will be too upset except for the real hardcore Guardian of the Galaxy people. And I mentioned I was reading a trade. I read Annihilation Conquest, which was the sequel to another big storyline, I guess, called Annihilation. I would say that was a pretty good place to start, because it was more or less not the individual origin stories of the team members, but it was kind of explained how the team got together in the first place. Other Phase 3 rumors, while we're talking about superheroes, we might as well just... we talked about this a little bit through text, Pat. Phase 3 rumors include... Phase 3 will be after Avengers 2. The Hulk was the breakout character of the Avengers, and so the makers of the Avengers get constantly asked if the Hulk is going to get another movie, despite his past 2 movies failing to become giant successes. And Kevin Feige said he was a big fan of the storylines Planet Hulk and World War Hulk, which are... Planet Hulk is another cosmic storyline where the Hulk is more or less this space gladiator. And World War Hulk, without spoiling too much, is kind of a sequel to that, but set on Earth. Pat, are you familiar with these stories at all?
I've seen the Planet Hulk cartoon.
Oh, yes.
And I do not know World War Hulk, but I could not see them doing Planet Hulk without introducing the Red Hulk. So not to get too, nerdy, bogged down in nerddom, but they'd also have to introduce at least from the cartoon, he's not in the comic from what I hear, but Beta Ray Bill, and I believe the Silver Surfer was originally in it. So in Planet Hulk, so maybe that's why they were working so hard to get him from Fox. But I don't know. That just seems like too far of a leap. What can you tell me about World War Hulk?
World War Hulk, in the beginning of Planet Hulk, the Marvel superheroes, believing the Hulk is a threat to humanity, send him off into outer space. World War Hulk is him coming back with some of the aliens he met with. Some other stuff happens that I won't spoil.
So it's post-Planet Hulk.
It's post-Planet Hulk. He comes back with a bunch of his alien buddies, and he is out for revenge. So if the idea for Avengers 3 is that the Hulk is the villain, which I could see if they do a Planet Hulk, which again would depend on how successful these other space stories are they plan to do in Phase 2, I could definitely see World War Hulk being the Avengers 3 plotline. But that's all speculation. Oh, and while we're talking about Marvel, Pat, did you see that picture of a Wolverine today that came on the internet?
Oh, all six-pack and turned around and something that looked like a Japanese bodega behind him?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot to it as an image. It's the first official image of Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, and he looks like Wolverine, and he looks like Hugh Jackman. But if there's anything to make you feel like less of a man, it's that guy. Fudge, he is in shape. Stop listening to us now and look online. Doesn't matter your sexual orientation. It will impress you. Let's stop talking about superheroes, though, Pat. We might get back to it later because we can't seem to help it. But there were a couple other announcements in cinema. You brought this next one to attention. Why don't you set it up?
Well, we can all remember a few years ago when they tried to make a Looney Tunes movie with Brendan Fraser, and it basically just was dead on arrival. And now I guess somebody at Warner Brothers said, hey, if they can bring the Muppets back to consciousness and have people care, maybe we can do the same thing with the Looney Tunes. And as much as I love the Looney Tunes as a kid, I just don't know if there's something for them in this marketplace. Maybe somebody said the same thing in a podcast a couple years ago about the Muppets. But Jacob, what do you think about this? Do you think that they could have Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck being all wiseacre on the screen again?
Oh, I love the Looney Tunes, and I definitely would hope that there's a place for them in today's marketplace. I know they currently have a cartoon on Cartoon Network that is thankfully truer to the original cartoons, bunch of shorts, after a few misguided attempts to make them extreme or hip. I actually believe it was called Looney Tunes Extreme or something stupid like that. That said, I never saw the film back in action, even though it was directed by Joe Dante, a director I really like who did Gremlins. And I do, unlike you, Pat, I have seen and grew up with Space Jam, the 1996 Looney Tunes.
Michael Jordan, Bill Murray crossover?
Yes, exactly. What makes me curious about this is there isn't a director announced or anything, and there hasn't been a release date, but who was hired to write it was Jenny Slate, who is famous for having one season on SNL and having dropped the F-bomb in her very first episode, and then getting fired a year later. Slate has been getting steady work here and there on television guest spots, but really broke out with her web, I guess you'd call it short film, Marcel the Shell, or something like that, which my wife loves. She just finds it so adorable and cute. It'll be curious to see if, she had some kind of crazy characters on SNL, and this Marcel the Shell, the basis of it is just that this is a ridiculously cute shell with a googly eye in it. Maybe the Looney Tunes is somewhere between those two sensibilities, and maybe Slate can do something cool with it. I'm definitely curious to see where it goes for sure.
Maybe they're just putting this out there as a feeler to say, hey, we hired this person. We may not do it, but we want to see what the consensus is on these characters in a film.
Well, they got us talking about it, so I'm sure Warner Brothers hit the green light just now, listening to this podcast. You also brought I don't know why you're trying to bring me down here, Pat. You also brought to my attention that The Great Gatsby, a film that I was talking about a few podcasts ago, really looking forward to, has been pushed back. I think it was pushed back a while ago, but they finally gave it a release date. And the article that you shared with me didn't seem too positive on it. It was quote unquote early summer, which is May. The article presumed that this is a dead zone, but I don't know if that's necessarily the case.
Well, it's interesting, but I think it's mainly because just some of the films that have come out in May in the last couple of years, like this year was Battleship, and a few years back was Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. And I think they're feeling if this is May and it's not a superhero film to kick it all off, this could be something, expensive and glitzy, but not a whole lot of substance to it. And I know you got really high on the trailer when you saw it, but initially my first thought was, I don't care to see this at all.
It's funny how a release date can set your expectations, because now I'm pretty much convinced it's not going to be a great Oscar contender, really return to form for Baz Luhrmann or anything. But I still think it looks pretty flashy, and maybe they think moving it away from Christmas, it'll have less competition. It'll really stand out as a thinking person's movie in the middle of or right before the big superhero movies start up again. I don't know, but
well, it's interesting talking about release dates, because I just saw a trailer for a Jackie Robinson film that's coming out with Harrison Ford in it called 42, and I was like, wow, this film seems like it would be something they'd want to go for award season, but it's coming out in early spring as well, maybe even February. And I thought, wow, is it really that bad? That was the first thing that came to my mind, and that should not be how it is. It's just knowing the machine.
I want to be an optimist and just say maybe these movie seasons don't have the same power they used to, and maybe the studios are just trying to throw things in different spots just to see what works. But I don't know. Old habits die hard.
Well, let's cross our fingers and move on to the next story, which I want to bring up.
Yes.
It is Michael Bay doing Transformers 4. We can talk about this real quick because I haven't seen all the films. But his sole reason for doing it is he had a little reflection, and he heard the studio wanted to start it all over and reboot. But then he thought, I just can't let someone else grab my story and screw it up.
Those were the actual words, quote unquote, screw it up.
Yeah. Right before we hit record, we were saying, does he just have his head in the sand and doesn't read any of the trades and isn't obsessed with variety like everyone else out in Los Angeles?
The balls on that guy.
Didn't he screw up his own films?
I think the fans of the Transformers would definitely say he screwed them up. But I was actually looking forward to the idea of it being a new director who maybe cared about more than explosions, and I don't know. And he had this revelation. If you read the article, he had it in line, seeing the line for the Transformers amusement park ride. That would be a place where his imagination would get spurred.
What a weird disciple for Steven Spielberg to have.
Oh, I forget that he's a producer on those. Oh, now I'm going to be depressed the rest of the show, Pat.
Well, then let's move on to the next terrible thing. The originality chart. Somebody, I don't know who put this together, but this awesome chart showing Hollywood's waning creativity, as it's called. Oh, it's shortoftheweek.com. And if you look at this, based on last year's top grossing films, and they were, let's see here, there's 10 of them, and 8 of them are sequels, and 2 of them are adaptations, meaning none of them are original works. But if you go back 30 years to 1981, there are 7 original works, 2 sequels, and 1 adaptation, meaning that 30 years ago, Hollywood was willing to take risks, and last year it was all about just raking in the cash.
I wonder what the top 10, well, this year isn't over by any means, but I have a bad feeling that this was done every 10 years, so this year wouldn't be on that list. But I have a feeling it'd be the same thing. We'll put this graphic on our website, of course, and you can feel free to weep with us.
Well, do you feel the same thing that I do when I see a sequel, that I am not nearly as interested as if it's something, say, like we'll talk about later, that's the master? I'm like, ooh, you put a lot of value, I know, in screenwriters, maybe even over directors.
Yeah.
So that's thinking, wow, sounds like a really cool concept. Can they pull it off?
Well, I always used to get excited one year for the big high concept blockbuster like Inception or even Avatar, which I know people will attack that film's originality, but it was at least an original property. Like it wasn't based on Avatar: The Last Airbender or whatever. And this year, I don't think I had anything to really. I mean, the film I got most excited about was Prometheus, which is an Alien prequel. So yeah,
I think if there's anything that could be original, just right off the top of my head this year, that people might be getting super up for, I don't know if it's going to rake in top 10 cash, but Looper is the closest I can think of, and maybe The Master.
I don't know if The Master will be one of the top 10 grossing films of the year.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But,
I mean, there's original works. They just don't bring in the money because you can't sell it to kids.
Yeah, I don't think it's something that's going to get better by unless these artists like Christopher Nolan who are able to get original works made. Maybe we just need more of them, or they need to start mentoring young artists like Peter Jackson did with Neil Blomkamp, and we can get some fresh ideas with lots of explosions so people will go to them. I don't know what the answer, if there is an answer to this problem, but
we'll just cross our fingers and pray. Maybe we could go from all these downtrodden stories to maybe the most upbeat, cheery film of the year, and Paul Thomas Anderson's The Master.
How'd I get down here?
You're acting aggressive because you drank too much alcohol.
What do you do?
I am a writer, a doctor, a nuclear physicist, a theoretical philosopher. But above all, I am a man, just like you.
Following World War II, Freddie Quill has trouble adjusting to life outside the military. After falling into a drunken stupor in a chance encounter, he unknowingly becomes an apprentice to the Master.
You know, you should wake up, Val. Your father's speaking. You might learn something.
He's making all this up as he goes along. You don't see that?
Paul Thomas Anderson has become one of the screenwriter/director treasures of American cinema. His 4 major releases have all been considered masterworks in their own way, and Anderson's latest, The Master, sees him tackling the concepts of religion and cult belief in a film that enveloped last week's Toronto International Film Festival. So with a director who has an awe-inspiring track record for cinematic works and only directs a film every 4 years or so, a lot has been resting on this film's shoulders. Jacob, my question to you is very simple. Does PTA, as his fans so lovingly call him, deliver another masterpiece?
yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, probably. In
Just
fact,
be strong, bring it.
probably. I don't want to gush too much. Actually, over the first 2/3 of this film, I was like scared because I was like, I'm really enjoying this film, but I don't know if I will have anything to say about it, just because I was just so in awe of it and the craft that was on display. I had the same feeling with There Will Be Blood, his last film, which was what I would call like the best film of that decade. Really loved There Will Be Blood. If I'm to compare the two, I don't think this one is quite as strong because in the last third, I think it loses some steam. That said, it's a very interesting film. I'm still wrestling with it. It's a hard film to take at face value for sure. Pat, would you gush? I mean, I haven't really got into the gushing yet, but just so I know where we are here.
Well, after weeks of being on separate sides of the page, I'm going to agree with you. I really like it, and I am a major Paul Thomas Anderson fan. Magnolia is one of my favorite films, but I really like the dynamic, and a lot of people have talked about like the father-son, teacher-pupil dynamic between Hoffman and Phoenix in this film. But I master, pet, whatever. I really like it a lot. I think the dynamic between the two of them is so interesting, and the fact that obviously Joaquin Phoenix's character, Freddie Quill, just kind of like falls into his lap. And then Lancaster Dodds, Philip Seymour Hoffman's character, just tries to bring him into the fold so much. But I don't know if it's the post-traumatic stress disorder or maybe has his own issues. But the fact that he just unknowingly resists and won't become a true disciple of it, it's a really interesting look at belief and the people around him and family structure and what people do who are suffering some sort of emptiness, what they fill those holes with. It's something that a lot of his films actually deal with. It seems like all the side characters, especially Magnolia, there's something there that's just, they live in their own delusion. You could point to Boogie Nights and say that the main character is so delusional that he doesn't even recognize his own delusions. And it's really interesting to see just all the misdirection and not to mention beautiful cinematography that goes into this film.
You touched on it a little bit. I think what's so interesting about this film is it's kind of the central mystery of why these characters are bound to one another and what they see in each other. I think the master character says he wants to make Joaquin Phoenix a guinea pig or whatever, but maybe there's something sexual going on between them two. It's so hard to really decipher, and the film doesn't offer any answers. It's really one of those Rorschach films where it's whatever the audience member brings to it. It fits really well into his filmography for sure. If I have a problem with it, it's that I think it takes a lot of the themes that are a little more nuanced than his other films and kind of is a little too overt about them. I think masculinity and man's human or animal nature is something that's through his films, especially I think Punch Drunk Love, and certainly There Will Be Blood. But I think in this film they actually say it aloud one or two many times. They're like, he's just like an animal, which kind of made me roll my eyes a little bit.
You know, looking at this film, I had a little worry about, was he really pushing his filmography or, you know, his story, his screencraft somewhere that it hasn't been, and that, you know, his last film had a lot of the unease and, you know, shocking lead character that this film has. That, you know, Freddie Quill is kind of like Freddie Quill and the Lancaster Dodd, the master character, are kind of Daniel Day-Lewis's character almost split in half from the last film. One person is entirely insane, and the other person is almost too smart for his own good. So smart that he might have pushed himself into a corner. But looking at the film when I initially came out, you know, I was like, wow, that says a lot. It's interesting, the religious dogma and the embrace of all that, and obviously people have talked a lot about Scientology, but it almost seemed that the Freddie Quill character was kind of an aim at how people look at mental disturbance. I don't know if you've given any thought to him and the way that he was, but after that, he's coming out of post-traumatic distress disorder, and the only thing that he cares about really and truthfully is, you know, having sex. And when someone asks him about it, he said he doesn't like anyone touching his girls. That's the only thing he cares about.
Yeah, sexuality is definitely a big part of the film, and Joaquin Phoenix's character is so interesting because he's not a likable main character to have, and that's what reminded me so much of Punch Drunk Love. I think that's what turned off a lot of people about that film and Adam Sandler's performance. Yeah, as someone who's mentally unstable and the way other people treat him and how he really doesn't seem to have a place, I think it says something about religion certainly, but also just how we treat outsiders.
I was really interested in the dynamic between each character individually, like Hoffman and Adams, and just the level of deceit that, you know, you think Hoffman is waging on everyone else. But he's so good at making it up as he goes, as his son says, that his wife, Amy Adams, is bought in so hard that by the end of the film, she almost seems like the fire and brimstone leader, and, you know, like raising Cain, so to speak, for the cause, as it's called.
Good science, by definition, allows for more than one opinion. Otherwise, you merely have the will of one man, which is the basis of cult.
And this is where we are at. To have to explain ourselves. For what? The only way to defend ourselves is to attack.
I don't know when it comes to the Oscar race if they're going to push both of these lead actors as lead actors, or one will be a supporting, but this is the most I've ever liked Joaquin Phoenix, even though, like I said, his character's unlikable, but I think it's a really powerful performance.
I agree.
And there are scenes where these two characters are just face to face in a room, and the processing scenes are it's, if you're familiar with Scientology, it's kind of like the auditing sessions. That's one of the best scenes, acting showcases I can ever remember seeing.
Yeah, I agree. You know, I read somewhere in this last week that it was almost like watching like Brandau versus Brandau, you know, who can be more, you know, deep of a character in the moment and just completely own the stage at one moment. And it's not like in There Will Be Blood, where it was Paul Dano versus Daniel Day-Lewis, and it was obvious that they were in completely different acting classes. It was a spectacle to be seen, to see what Phoenix did in this film. I would say he should get it just because he made this incredible transformation.
Yeah, it's definitely just his body language alone. It's just interesting to watch.
Well, you know, one of these things is that this movie was shot in, I believe it's 65 millimeter and then projected in 70 millimeter. I obviously didn't get a chance to see that. I don't think you did either.
No, I saw it digital.
But was there anything about the filmmaking, like itself and the way that it was shot, that you think was, you know, something different or revolutionary or inspired by a certain place? Obviously, you could make the Kubrick connection with the straight, steady, long shots and centered, you know, symmetry.
I'm trying not to be too hyperbolic here, but I do not think there is a filmmaker making dramas on the scale or the level of craft that PTA is at this point. He shoots it all with these wide lenses, and there's just this high level of visual craft. I noticed how he uses low angles and high angles, especially when someone's looking at the master, it's shot from this extreme low angle, and when the master's looking down on someone, it's from this very high angle or angle looking down. Just little touches like that. There's a lot of beautiful tracking shots. There's one where Freddie Quill's walking beside a boat, and it rack focuses, and then there's this great depth of field, and you can see everyone on the boat having this great time, and then it's back to and then he catches up to the camera and then gets on the boat all in one master shot. I mean,
Yeah, there was another scene earlier in the film too that was, and that's pretty early, but when in the trailer you see him grab the guy's tie, but that was all really one long scene where he gets in this fight and starts basically losing it in the department store. But that was impressive as well, and so much so that it was like it was almost kind of felt we were watching something exploitive, watching this guy lose his mind. Well, before we wrap the review, is there anything in it that you thought was, either a retread or missed the point? I mean, did you buy into the third act and felt the resolution was deserving of, the craft that we see for the rest of the film?
Yeah, that's where I mentioned it at the very beginning of our discussion here. I do think it kind of, I don't know if it falls apart in the third act. I'm still trying to figure out what like throughout the film, there are scenes where you're not sure what they're trying to express in the scene. And I think for the entire third act, it consists of scenes like that. I think There Will Be Blood kind of had the same problem where it has this great buildup, but where does it really go to? And it goes into an interesting place in There Will Be Blood. The Master, I don't think ends in quite as strong of a place. It's still a weird place, just almost as tonally off as There Will Be Blood's ending. There's a song involved, I can say that. But I'm still trying to figure out why it ended where it did instead of like 3 or 4 scenes earlier. It's a very curious ending, but I love to chew on it. It'll make a repeat viewing more interesting. Pat, any criticisms before we wrap it up?
Well, I guess the only thing that I really liked and at the same time felt like they needed to stay a little away from is that he keeps mentioning Doris, and people bring it up that this 16-year-old girl that he used to have a thing for when he was in his early 20s. And by the time it happens in the end, I always felt like it had been too long and been disconnected enough that I really didn't know what they were trying to make from that. I really liked the point that they do not go too much into Freddie Quill's backstory. And I kind of felt like they were trying to tell us something about him, but I didn't know if it needed to be said. Maybe that's just me not getting what he was going with that, but that's my sole criticism at this point. Maybe I'll watch it again and say, wow, what was I saying? This was utter crap.
Yeah, even though I had those problems with the third act, I would say it's probably easily the best film I've seen so far this year.
I don't know if I'll go as far as saying it's my favorite film of the year so far, but I will definitely say it is, in the race and probably leading the pack.
All right. The Master is rated R for sexual content, graphic nudity, and language. When we get back, our FWOAC Franchise Flashback continues with a discussion of Ridley Scott's Alien.
I'd love to get you.
New on DVD this week, that's the week of September 25th. The Avengers, the big hit from this summer. Golden AC Award winner, The Avengers. I'm going to have to try and find some cash between the cushions to pick up that Blu-ray. Also, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, Part 1, one of those animated DC Universe movies that come out. I usually like to check those out. This isn't new, but I wanted to put it in the list because I want it so bad. Bond 50, which is a 22 film collection of all the James Bond movies put into one place for the first time ever. And rounding out the list is Resident Evil Damnation, which is a computer animated Resident Evil movie. Just thought I'd throw that in there because there really wasn't much. I think people know that The Avengers is going to be the big seller this week.
I don't know why anybody would buy Bond 50 22 film collection when there is a new film coming out in 2 months. It just seems like you're burning your money. It's like, hey, buy this, and then you're going to have to tag on the extra.
Yeah, there is that. It's just if you want to own them all, it's been a pain in the butt before because they would always put them in separate collections and they would mix up the good ones and the bad ones. So if you wanted Thunderball, you had to buy The World Is Not Enough or whatever. So I commend them for putting them all in one place, even though, yeah, now that you mention that, if I did go out and buy that, I would have to add Skyfall just lying there separately. Now I'm depressed, Pat. I'm depressed again.
I'm sorry. That's why I'm upset that I own the quadrilogy, because now I have to go, when they come out with the Prometheus and its sequel, I've got to wait until Ridley Scott basically dies to buy it.
All right, Pat, did you check out any additional movies that we haven't talked about yet this week?
Well, first, I'll just make a quick comment that on our pilot episode, we were talking about H+, I believe it's Bryan Singer online web episode show, and I saw the first 3 clips. I wouldn't call them episodes because they're only about 4 minutes long. But it's going somewhere, and I'm interested to see what's going to happen there. More on that after I see probably chapters 2, 3, and 4. But I saw an activist film last Thursday for a cause that my wife is a major supporter of, and that would be home birth. and the movie was called Freedom for Birth. As a documentary filmmaker, Jacob, I will tell you that it was all just just talking heads, hours of talk, just 60 minutes of talking heads with a couple shots of home births and a lot of talk about how the EU has everything wrong. It's not that I'm against the message. Actually, if I ever have a kid, I would really be pro home birth, but just the style of the filmmaking was less than appealing for me. And I would say I'm all for activist films because it gets an idea out there that maybe I don't know about, or a cause that maybe I would support. But this one is, it tries to do it, just doesn't get it across.
Things I checked out this week. 2 weeks ago, we talked about the pilot of Revolution. I checked out another pilot. I checked out Last Resort, which was really quite good. I highly recommend people who like serialized drama check that out on Thursday. Really overstuffed pilot, but some really exciting stuff.
Why does this not... I can't picture Last Resort in my head. What is this show?
Last Resort is about a submarine crew that disobeys direct orders to launch nuclear weapons at another country, and consequently they become enemies of the United States. And that all happens within the first 15 minutes, and it introduces about a dozen or so characters in those 15 minutes as well. It stars Andre Braugher and Scott Speedman, and Sean Ryan, who did The Shield and The Unit, and
Well, this
Carriers.
sounds like an interesting concept, but
Yes.
does it have more than a mini-series worth of information or, drama to get across?
That's the question. I think we've talked a little bit about movies that would work better as TV shows and vice versa. And the first hour of this, the pilot, is like a great first hour of a film. Curious to see where it goes from there. For now, I'm hooked. I'm definitely going to tune in. And I also went to a movie that we talked about briefly last week. I went to Dread in 2D. And I can't give it a strong recommendation, but it's a pretty decent B film. It's a low-budget action sci-fi. And the story isn't quite strong enough to compensate for these B-movie production values, but fans of the character might really dig it. I'm not a big fan of the character. Like the Punisher, I think he's too much of a fascist archetype than an actual human being. But I will say that the film, from what I'm familiar with in the 2000 AD comics, I've read a couple, this film captures that kind of gonzo sci-fi storytelling, and Carl Urban is fun. I think he's a good actor. I wish he was a bigger star than he is.
Do you think there's any chance that they're going to make a sequel to this?
Not after the U.S. box office. I don't know how well it did in its native U.K. It was a UK-South Africa co-production.
Okay.
It's pretty fun. I would recommend a DVD rental before someone rushes out to see it in the theater, though.
If that's your recommendation, I'll just wait.
Probably no sequel for Dread, but now that we've talked a little bit about our viewing habits, it's time to continue our FWOAC Franchise Flashback with Alien.
Wait a minute, this movement seems to have life.
The crew of the spaceship Nostromo make an unexpected detour and find more than they bargained for, and the sci-fi horror classic Alien.
Don't! Move down! Move down! Get out! Oh. No, not that way! The other way! Go! Dallas?
Before all the sequels, prequels, and crossover films, there was 1979's Alien. Directed by Ridley Scott, written by Dan O'Bannon, whose student film Dark Star we discussed last week, with designs by Swiss surrealist artist H.R. Geiger, Alien set the standard for outer space horror films. Pat, you've mentioned in the past about how this is one of your absolute favorite films, and I agree that it's pretty darn great. So with that said, there's no real reason to do a typical FWOAC-style review, so with the franchise flashback, we'll be discussing each film in a franchise in a more structured fashion. Also, unlike our normal reviews, there will probably be more spoilers. At least for this 30-year-old film anyway. I already touched on it a bit, but why don't you start off by telling us your personal history with Alien?
Well, let me start by saying that Alien is not, a space movie. It is just a horror film, like, a zombie or vampire film, or maybe even a slasher film. And the best way to see it is, late at night in the dark by yourself or with a girlfriend or something. And it just so happens that I actually did not see this movie until I was in college. And I saw it in a dark room way late at night with now an ex-girlfriend, and it blew me away. And not just because it's, super tense, but because they don't make movies like this where the pace is so slow and like barely anything happens for such a long time. And it's just the bleak look, and it feels like there is some sort of realism to their space travel and how they interact with an alien encounter. Just when they start going down to this dark, murky, super cold planet, and everyone starts, then I can't remember her name, but the one character is like, "Let's get out of here," and she says it about 5 times. It's super interesting, dark realism with a fantastic use of what I can probably only deem as cabin fever.
There are a lot of strobe lights on that ship, I've noticed on the rewatch.
Hey, well, that's just what happens when you're working with an old ship. Come on.
I will say, to talk about my personal history with Alien, it was the third of the Alien movies I had seen. I saw them out of order. I probably saw this one for the first time in around 1997, and since then I've probably seen it only half a dozen times, which is actually quite a lot. I don't rewatch movies a ton. This is actually the second time this year I've watched Alien.
Me too.
Did you watch it before Prometheus like I did?
That is exactly what I did. Thank you.
I wanted to catch if there were any Easter eggs in Prometheus. I wanted to kind of see how the timelines lined up, which I found out later they weren't really that interested in that. And I watched the theatrical cut earlier in May or whenever I watched it, and I watched the director's cut this time, and I think it's only the second time I've watched that director's cut. Your rewatch, Pat, was this better or worse than you remembered the film being?
I'd say it's about as equal as I remember it. I don't know if it could necessarily be any better, since I've already said it's in my top 3, but there are certain things that I admired a little more, but maybe we'll get to that later. But it's definitely still in line with my memory of the film, and I only saw it a couple months ago. But do you think it's better or worse than when you saw it before Prometheus? Has Prometheus tainted this film for you?
No, that actually would make the question a lot more interesting. I guess my impression is about the same it was in May, which was better than when I had seen it the last time, which was in college or something. I pick up a lot more on the kind of body horror of the film, and how it's kind of a disease infestation film alongside just being a scary haunted house movie. I remember the first viewing, there are a lot of cast members that if you're not familiar with the actors, which I've gotten to be more over time, it might be more difficult to track who's who, but repeated viewings have definitely made that easier.
Well, I guess pushing on, what do you think is the best part of the film?
The best part, this could be a scene, a character, a performance, or a storyline. And I would say the best part of Alien is definitely the H.R. Geiger designs. He designed the ship, the alien ship. I don't think he designed the Nostromo. Designed the architect in the ship, the main xenomorph alien, and the facehugger. They look so freakish and cool. I think if the alien would have been slightly goofy, this film wouldn't age nearly as well as it does. Those are really iconic designs, those creatures. Pat?
Well, if I was going to go with a character, just in line with Prometheus, where I thought he was David the android, who everybody knew he was an android, and they didn't think nobody thought he was human. In this film, Ash, nobody knows that he's a synthetic, and when it turns out that, I'm not a big fan of that scene, but I'm definitely a big fan of what happens and how it escalates from him just being a normal guy with all these quirks, and he even tries on his boots in his dressing room and tries running with them on, like, will he be able to escape something if it's like a freakish beast that they run into? And it slowly devolves into him just being, a maniacal, doing exactly what his prime directive is keeping the alien alive at all costs. In Prometheus, you're unsettled by David, where this film, you probably don't see it coming unless you're some sort of sci-fi android, master scientist.
There is no way to see it coming because they don't even establish that this is a world where androids could exist. And that's one of the things that makes that so awesome. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, and you realize, I think that's one of the things that makes it a sci-fi film more than a horror film. I digress. Moving on to the weakest part. I know it's hard for you to pick the weakest part of one of your favorite films, Pat, but I'm asking you to do it now.
All right, easy. I'll go with 2. Okay. Right away, I said Ash's scene where he comes to the climax and him and Ripley start fighting. His dismemberment scene, just watching it almost seemed very clumsy, like they hadn't thought it out. They hadn't blocked out the scene, because it turns into a handheld camera where he's standing there over Ripley. He's suffered some sort of blow from Ripley where he starts reacting in an odd manner, and he stands there lurking for a bit, like he doesn't know what he's doing. I'd have to imagine that an android would be a little smarter than that, but it's just a very clumsy fight scene. And then his reanimation, if you see the film, it's probably the one thing that ages terribly and will only get worse as time goes on. His dismembered body is lying there, and it's very obviously just a mannequin that they've put some some face stuff on, and as they, you know, try and get him to wake back up because they've dismembered him, there's a snap cut where suddenly his head's on the table.
Yeah.
It looks pretty bad, and that scene was kind of clumsy, and I don't know if they just didn't know how to they said, we'll get to it when we get to it.
What's the second thing?
The second thing, I don't really buy the alien being as smart as it is. They don't really, I mean, you can't really know, but it's just super intelligent. It's got amazing survival prowess, and its ability to maneuver the ship without anybody on the ship being able to just turn on a video monitor and say, hey, it's downstairs in level B. I didn't get that. But
My weakest part, and this is, obviously we're spoiling the film because this is at the very end. It's Ripley in her underwear at the very, very end of the movie. Up to this, not that I have anything wrong with Sigourney Weaver in her underwear, but up until this point, the film has been very gender neutral, and it treats males and females as equal. And then she strips down to literally the smallest bikini brief possible. And I get that it expresses how vulnerable she is, but she didn't have to be, we didn't have to get some plumber crack like we do. I think they could have handled that a little more tactfully.
Can't argue with that, Jacob.
Yes. Is there anything that resonated with you this viewing that you never noticed before on a previous viewing? This can include the May viewing as well.
Oh, I don't know if I haven't noticed this before, but I really like just the dynamic between the characters, and the characters, each one of them seems to be laid out so smartly. And that, you know, everyone loses their cool and almost shuts down except Ripley, and nobody seems to do the thing that, you know, is like, well, they'd never do that in that situation. They all have their own little foolish things that they do. Like, they don't turn around, obviously, because why would they? Or Ripley suddenly runs after her friends because they're in distress, when the smart thing to do would be to just keep working at getting the ship to blow up because her friends are goners with this alien. And she goes after the cat. They've all got their little picadillos that make them real people. And even Tom Skerritt's character, the person in charge, he seems to have it out for just everybody. He doesn't care. He thinks he's close to home, and he's tired of working with them. Even with Ripley, he has what seems to be a short fuse, but he doesn't really show it. So it seems like they're really flesh blood characters, something that I probably noticed before, but I never really gave too much weight to.
And I'm glad they didn't just give each one of them a character quirk, which I think we'll see in the sequels as they go on. Something it didn't resonate with me before. It's a scene we've talked about, actually. I forgot how freaking brutal the fight scene between Ash and Ripley is. He tries to shove a magazine down her throat. I totally didn't, that before, like, it probably just washed over me, like, it's violence. But when you think about, like, the film itself is kind of has this rape allegory with the aliens ingesting themselves. And now it's a male really beating up on a female, and then he tries to shove a magazine down her throat. It's pretty wicked.
Why would a robot do that?
I don't know.
That's not very efficient.
Not programmed very well.
So obviously we've got weakest parts, best parts. Now the thing that definitely throws it into modern times, when they reboot this thing, probably in 15 years. What could you see being changed about this movie?
Well, that's a very sad proposition, because I think
this is just the boo-hoo episode of this podcast with the news and everything. What's the boo-hoo for this film when it gets remade?
For the most part, I think this film has aged really well. It uses practical effects and models, so those don't age as poorly as CGI. But I could see the computer needing updating, as they did in Prometheus. And the cynic in me would say that today the relationship between Ripley and Dallas would probably be romanticized. There's some subtext there, but it would be more overt, I'm afraid, in a remake. How about you? Anything?
Well, I was thinking that when they do this, they're definitely going to throw in a lot of expository talk about, space travel and the ship, and trying to make it a little more, believable on a sci-fi level, which is definitely, it doesn't do much of that in this film. There were a couple parts where she said, engage. What did she say? She said, engage anti-gravity. I'm altering the vector. I was like, what does that nonsense even mean? But I think if they made that film now, they'd probably try and throw in a bunch of garbage that doesn't make any sense. And just to quickly mention, because I've listened to the commentary a couple times through, the Ripley and Lambert characters, the two females on the ship, in an earlier draft of the film, they were lesbian lovers. Maybe they could bring that back.
Oh my! All right. Well,
but let's move on to maybe our second to last or last question. Does this film stand up on its own, or do you think that there had to be a sequel, or there needed to be a prequel?
I think this film absolutely stands alone, and
Yeah, the question's almost absurd.
Yeah.
But we have. I figure if we're gonna do this right, we should ask all of the films almost the same questions.
Yeah, and we're not going to get into our feelings of the sequels yet, but I didn't leave this film with any questions or plot threads that I felt needed to be wrapped up. I'm assuming you're kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, I agree. And what's interesting, too, is that this is well before they even thought about franchises, because there is no real foreshadowing, and there's not like a question of, oh, what's the next chapter? Obviously, the alien and Ripley are so strong that you want to know, oh, what happened to those aliens, or what's up with Ripley next. But it doesn't say, they don't show you Thanos at the end all of a sudden.
Well, I think the sequel, which we will talk about next week, does find some things to pick up from the first film, but that's all talk for next week. Alien is rated R for sci-fi violence / gore and language, and it's available now on every imaginable home video format.
Thank you for indulging us in the FWOAC Franchise Flashback. When we come back, we'll tell you what's in theaters and our surprise pick for next week's review.
So what's coming up in theaters this week? This is the week of September 29th. A few big releases. Hotel Transylvania, which is an Adam Sandler animated comedy from the creator of the Powerpuff Girls and Samurai Jack. That's the only reason I'm kind of interested in that, but not as interested as I was in Paranorman, and I still haven't seen that yet. Looper, which... Pat?
This is our surprise pick for next week. I don't think it's a big surprise.
No, not at all. Otherwise, we would have to review either Pitch Perfect, the Anna Kendrick a cappella team movie, or Won't Back Down, which I believe is about women who won't back down.
Great title. That's almost as clever a title as Man on a Ledge.
Pat, I understand you've been busy updating our website a little bit.
Yes, there is a little bit on there that you can find now for contacts, different ways you can contact us in case you forget and don't want to listen to the entire podcast. And there's also a sub page for Jacob's work, my work, just to get a little know a little bit about us. And if you want to follow our filmmaking endeavors. But of course, to do any of that, you need to know where to go. And our website is, grab your pens, ladies and gentlemen, filmcastwithoutacause.com. That is filmcastwithoutacause.com. And if you want to contact us or leave any feedback, please do so in this episode of the podcast on filmcastwithoutacause.com, or send us an email at filmcastwoac@gmail.com, or tweet us on Twitter. That is where you tweet, I assume, and nowhere else. That would be FilmcastWOAC, at FilmcastWOAC. And that's how you get a hold of us. Jacob, how do you want to close this thing out?
Usually I just say, thank you for joining me, Pat. And then I say bye-bye, and then I wave to absolutely no one because it's a radio show and no one can see me wave.
Excellent. That's a wrap.
But bye. Maybe we should say that's a wrap.
Why not?
That's a wrap. All right. Thank you very much.
Have a good night, folks.
We're still going. No,
Okay.
no, we're not. But we could be.
Done.
I'm finished.